Hello, folks. Welcome back to WW2 TV, and it will be a fairly short show tonight because we're just going to highlight this project and leave it at that. It's not going to be a sprawling hour and a half one, so don't worry too much. Like last night's show was amazing. Did go on a bit because there's lots to cover. So, just if you are new to WW2 TV, don't forget to subscribe. The links you need, particularly today, are the links to the project that we're going to be talking about, are all in the description below. So use that to then go on and find this project we're talking about. And my guest today, he's been on WW2 TV several times before. Dilip Sarkar MBE, prolific author, mostly Royal Air Force and pilots, but also dabbled in Arnhem and various other projects. And he's now a big part of this project, the Battle of Britain People's Project. I'll bring him in now. So good evening, Dilip. How are you today?
Hi, Paul. Everything okay?
Everything good. So this is something quite major, isn't it? Well, I remember when we spoke to you last time, you were talking about the fact you've still got these book ideas, but this time you're opening it up. It's not just your work. You're using it as an opportunity to get more material. It's all about finding the material. So in a nutshell, what is the Battle of Britain People's Project?
Okay, so basically, for the last over 40 years now, I have sought out original material, and it never ceases to amaze me how much is still out there. And it really, every single book I write, there is new material about people that comes in, and what's happening now is, as we were discussing before the show started, a few years ago, we were lucky enough to still have the survivors to talk to, the combatants, the eyewitnesses, and so on and so forth. Those days are largely gone now. And what I'm finding with the work that I've done over the last few years, books like a bit more than dabbling in Arnhem 1944, The Human Tragedy, The Bridge Too Far, which was all about casualties, followed up by Battle of Britain 1940, The Finest Hour's Human Cost. And the stuff that was actually in family archives, letters, diaries, unpublished memoirs, photographs that have not yet been properly recorded and shared. And it just astonishes me that all of these years later, and the Battle of Britain with such a massive bibliography, that there is still material out there to be found. So the idea of this project is that the Battle of Britain Memorial Trust, which achieved and is responsible for the National Memorial to the Few down at Capel-le-Fern, the trust hasn't got its own official history of the Battle of Britain, and I've long thought that it should have. So it's a great honour for me, after a lifetime, to be doing this, because the ultimate aim of the project is to produce a 7-volume history of the Battle of Britain for the Trust. And the project itself is, instead of me having to trace people and reach out myself, we're kind of reversing that process. So it's about public engagement, and in the process, inviting people to engage with us and share any material, and also raise the profile of the Battle of Britain in the process. And I can see going forward that there would be a number of different partners coming on board the project. I mean, the introductory video, my great and old friend, Tornado Dan, John Peters, introduced it, who is a trustee at the RAF Club and the after dinner speaker there this year on Battle of Britain Day. And it's going to gather momentum. So it just remains to be seen what comes in, really.
And that will lead me on to my next question, which is, until you get the material, you won't know what you've got. But in anticipation, what will the parameters be? Because everybody watching this thinks Battle of Britain, they think those dogfights over the Kent coast. But of course, the Battle of Britain is Bomber Command, there's Coastal Command, there's the War on the Ground, there's the Navy, there's local defence volunteers, there's evacuees. Where do you envisage the boundaries and parameters of this project extending to?
Well, this is the whole point, and this is why it's going to be done in 7 volumes. It is a huge story. You have got so many different threads running concurrently in the Battle of Britain story. And as you write, I mean, I've just got today 100,000 words in of the first volume, and the Battle of Britain hasn't even started yet. And in fact, today I've got to the 5th of July, which was when Bomber Command started the Battle of the Barges. And it's a massive story. And I'm not just interested in the aircrew experience. What about all the support staff as well? Plus, you know, the experience of civilians being bombed, that's very important, because air power doctrine being what it was between the wars, with the bomber was always going to get through, and that didn't actually happen. And equally, it was believed that a civilian population could be bombed into submission, and that didn't happen either. So the actual diary entries and things like that from civilians, I think, is crucially important. I mean, we've got all the home intelligence daily reports to sift through, which are fascinating in themselves. But it's a bit like going fishing. Until I've been fishing, I don't know what I'm going to catch, do I? So it's a bit like that. And at the end of the day, you know, if nothing at all was to come in, which isn't the case because it has already, my archive that I've assembled over the last 40 odd years is big enough to do this anyway. So, you know, that's it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm privileged to do it. I think we're going to have, as each volume comes out, there'll be a launch down at the Wing and the Scramble Visitor Experience. There'll be an exhibition which will go with each book, photographic exhibition, I expect, you know, and I'll be out and about giving presentations about the project. And at the moment, you know, it is very much an embryonic thing that we wanted to get the word out there. How it's going to develop, how it's going to evolve, it's too early to say. I mean, we may end up with volunteers helping, we may end up with all kinds of things, you know. So my priority at the moment is just getting the word out there and starting work on what is a big project.
Well, you said it yourself there. I mean, that the revolution of the last couple of years, this COVID era we've lived through, is this expansion of who shares history and where history comes from, and communication between people who are sharing history. That's been the revolution. So, you know, there were days back in your early career, another one of my guests, where it was very much a solo project, and now it is very much a collaborative process because of the way archives have opened up and the way people communicate. And I think the interesting thing to me that I'll ask your views on is that I think when the Battle of Britain was raging, there was a sense of it being the battle of those who were actually in blue or in khaki taking part. But because of popular memory, the Battle of Britain has come to represent, as the project is called, the People's War. And I think, to me, that's the angle that I think I'd like to see, is that idea of the people on the ground who perhaps at the time weren't considered to be doing something incredibly pivotal. They were doing something, operating machinery at an airfield, or they were stacking ammunition into machine gun belts, whatever it was they were doing, or the observer corps. And I think that's the perception now, is the Battle of Britain was the whole country in many ways battling the Germans, if not physically, but certainly mentally. And I'm assuming that's something you want to capture.
Well, absolutely, very much so. And this is what I said in the introductory video to the project. You know, I'm interested in absolutely everything. And I mean, one fascinating source I remember when I did the book Angriff Westland, which was about attacks on the West Country, and specifically the aircraft factory at Yeovil, Westlands, which led to Sherborne being hit by mistake and the town centre virtually obliterated. But we found that Sherborne School, to give the pupils to focus their minds after this traumatic experience, they got them all to write down what they remembered of the bombing, you know. So things like that are just like gold dust. Absolutely fantastic, because it's not just about being in a Hurricane cockpit or you know, a Blenheim attacking barges over in the Channel ports. It's not just about that. It's a massive, massive story, and that's really what I'm trying to unlock, because I've got mountains of well, you can't see it on the wall, but I mean, my files and files and files of correspondence with survivors going back to the early 80s. You know, I've got all that. So I'm just interested to see what else is out there. What about the police? You know, police records. I used to be a police officer. The problem is there's never been a national preservation policy of historical police documents. So it varies from force to force. And civil defence records. What about gunners? What about, you know, you mentioned the Observer Corps earlier on. all of these things, you know, and the one thing that I always remember is when Supermarine was bombed on the 24th of September. The two youngest casualties were Douglas Cruikshank, who was 14, working in the factory, and a 19-year-old typist, Peggy Moon. You know, and they were incredibly vulnerable down at Southampton with Cherbourg, 60 miles away. You know, and yet they still went to work, and it was attacked a number of times until 2 days after that raid. It was virtually obliterated, the factory. But, you know, these are tremendous stories of human endurance and human suffering too, you know, and it's not just about the gung-ho Battle of Britain myth, because it has been heavily myth-laden. And, you know, I'm also going to underpin the thing, you know, with what the Germans' actual plans were, because I don't think that's looked at often enough, really. We just sort of accept that there was this great battle, and yeah, there's an awful lot to unravel with this, and I think that the wider accounts can give it colour that we need to read about now.
Yeah, and we'll learn about ourselves as well as about the battle itself. So, Very Silent Mouse, great name by the way, is saying, what's the time frame for the project?
Yeah, I think that the first volume is looking to be launched in September 2023. So, you know, I'm probably about 20,000 words away from finishing it. And then what I will do is add into it any relevant material that turns up, you know, in the meantime, because we won't have to actually have the book to the printers until, well, for 12 months, you know, so there's plenty of time. And, you know, there will be material coming in, and I you know, I should be out there anyway. I mean, I've got some things that I want to go and look at and add. So yeah, it's a long-term project. Certainly, it's going to take several years.
Brilliant. And Paul Reid from Old Front Line is asking, out of interest, why 7 volumes and what will each cover? But I'm accepting that may morph and change as things come in. But was 7 just a random number, or is there something?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And Martin Mace and I, my commission editor, founder of Britain at War magazine, you know, everybody knows Martin. We've been talking about me doing this for about the last 2 years. So the reason I decided on 7 volumes, and in fact it could even be 8, because the first one is all of the background to this enormous story going back to when the Wright brothers first flew in 1903. You know, the use of air power in the First World War, how the system of defense was arranged in this country, the Germans, you know, including what Hitler's thoughts were in Mein Kampf and what his actual strategy was towards England, you know. But it's a massive story. And then that bit between the sort of 1st of July and the 9th of July that is not part of the official dates of the Battle of Britain. And that's what I'm writing about at the moment in great detail. And it's always Dowding, you know, himself, when he wrote his dispatch, said he arbitrarily selected the 10th of July for the start date. Well, of course, the problem is that there were a lot of pilots killed and wounded in that week before that are not amongst the few. So, you know, it's really, really important that we cover that. And I would like to see some kind of memorialization down at the National Memorial site that recognizes those people, which, you know, which I'm thinking about. So the first book is all the background. The next 5 books are each phase of the Battle of Britain individually. And then the final book is how the Battle of Britain has been commemorated, remembered, its place in popular myth and memory and popular culture, and film. I mean, I've got a book coming out imminently about the Battle of Britain on the big screen, which was fascinating to write, actually. So there's all of that, and it will conclude with a roundup of the museums, memorials, and sites of interest, because, you know, this is the whole point. We want people to go out and touch the Battle of Britain, because we still can, and go to fantastic museums like the Kent Battle of Britain Museum at Hawkinge, particularly, and go and visit the fused graves, and just go and see all these things. You know, it's not something we've got to sit 6 hours in traffic down in Kent to get across to France to do these days, or fly out to Schiphol and get to Arnhem. You know, this is in this country, and the Battle of Britain it's astonishing, really. It wasn't just fought over London and the southeast, or even the south coast. You know, the Battle of Britain was fought all over, and pilots, aircrew, casualties, civilian casualties came from all over the country. So there are graves to go and visit, and memorials to see. It's a massive, massive story, and I just hope that I do it justice, really.
Well, I mean, your track record suggests you will, and people are saying in the sidebar how excited they are about it. And you know, the idea of it going on about how the Battle of Britain endures today, and you know, touring trails and museums, and how it's perceived today is a very good way. What about, obviously, the Battle of Britain? We are now doing our best to acknowledge the fact that other nations were involved in the Battle of Britain. So presumably, you're happy to get people who were, you know, Polish, relative of Polish pilots and Americans. It's not just, you know, it's not just the English spirit; it's the international idea.
I mean, it's a multinational. It was a multinational air force that fought the Luftwaffe in 1940. So, you know, all of that is absolutely. I mean, I've written quite a lot about the Poles, actually, in this first introductory volume. So, yeah, I think that going back to the Poles, I mean, it used to be an untold story, and it was actually the story of a Polish pilot that got me embarked on this journey in the first place many, many years ago. And I knew lots of the Polish Battle of Britain pilots who were incredibly nice people, and kept a very low profile, really. And their stories weren't that well told. And that was really what started me off, why I wanted to research and write about the Battle of Britain. And I started about Polish pilots, as it happened. But I think it's a well-trodden path today. There have been a lot of books written about the Poles. So I'd like to learn a bit more about the Czechs and the Belgians. And I've just done a book with national treasure, former BBC presenter Jan Leeming, about René Mouchot, a Free French pilot who was killed in '43, Battle of Britain veteran, who Jan became absolutely fascinated with. And I've learned a lot doing that about the Free French. So, you know, again, this is it. Can you imagine what a massive story this actually is? And I just find it extraordinary, really, the whole subject.
Yeah, well, we're having people asking questions about whether or not Germany were ever intending to invade Britain, but I think that's a discussion for another day. We're talking about the project today, but
no, they did intend to, yeah. Whether they could have done it
never happened. Whether it was going to be successful is the pertinent question, I suppose. But the thing of, you know, we'll talk about how people can help. I mean, we'll explain it now. There's the website link we have in the description below, and there is a contact form where people can say what it is they would like to share. So that's how people can get involved. And are there other things they can do to obviously share it with other people, get it out there?
Yeah, spread the word, folks. You know, let's try and all work together to try and make this something to remember. I mean, I think probably, well, for me, I mean, I think when these are out, I'll have over 60 books out there by then, including these. And I think after that might just be me done, really. So it's a sort of it's just a massive project to go out with, really.
It would be a really kind of career highlight. It would be a legacy. I mean, all your books are a legacy to something.
Exactly. And that's what Martin and I started talking about a couple of years ago. That, I mean, I'm not getting any younger, you know. I mean, I'm 60 now, and you know, you're kind of thinking, well, after all these years and all the archival material I generated through my correspondence with survivors and things like that, you know, what a great thing to be able to leave for humanity a legacy like this, you know, which is a comprehensive, or as comprehensive as and inclusive as I can make it, history, and do something wonderful in the process, like raise awareness of the Battle of Britain and the National Memorial, and engage with the public. I mean, I think partnership working and public engagement is absolutely everything anyway, you know, and I've got a long history of that with all kinds of walks of my life. So I just think it's the pinnacle of everything I've done. And I'm not, you know, I was just the little kid in the street who was fascinated by Spitfires and Hurricanes, you know. So
I think we all were. But I mean, to kind of end on a not a tough question, but just a kind of a historically based question, because we've got people like James Jeffries and Paul Reed and Brad Sanquar, so, you know, PhD holding historians. The thing about opening up to the public is, you know, we all know that there are family stories that may or may not have exaggerated over the years. So you know, assure us that this project isn't just going to be any old account shoved in that someone said. It's going to go through the, you know, you were a police detective. Everything that everyone submits is going to go through the historical rigor of understanding it is true. So that process will have to be done.
yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, I you know, it's not just a question of hoovering up anecdotes and things like that have been handed down and so on. You know, if they're inaccurate, they won't go in. And if they can't be, you know, sometimes things can't be corroborated, but generally speaking, that's what I do. And I check facts, you know, like you say, when I was a detective. So my background isn't only as a qualified historian, it's also as a qualified professional detective. So oral history as well. I mean, you know, there's lots of conversations to be had around the accuracy of oral history. And I can tell you that if you and I were now taking statements to do with the violent disorder that took place in the pub last night, there's nobody in the room going to see it the same way. There's always going to be, you know, so oral history. I mean, that's a whole.
But there's of course room for the perceptions, isn't it? I mean, you know, if someone submits a piece saying, "I clearly remember my dad said he saw 17 Dorniers shot down over September the 20th over the bridge over there," that you know needs a lot of verification. But general memories of what the battle meant, that's very important to record. That if you get someone saying, "This is what the battle meant to me. That's how these are my memories of living through the era and the pride I felt." That kind of stuff is worthy and doesn't need to be.
Exactly. But as I said before, what I'm primarily interested in is any written record that's been left behind. You know, not so much things that have been passed down. I know apparently it does say anecdotes on the website, but I'll get that changed because, you know, that's not it. You know, what really inspired me to do this is the amount of original material I have found over the last few years, particularly from second generation or third generation that have kept this stuff. And even Tom Glee, very famous Battle of Britain pilot, who wrote his own book, I Had a Row with a German in 1941, very early account. You would think that there's nothing left to do with Tom Glee. But when I went to see Tom's daughter, well, it was just extraordinary. There's a 500-page original, his unpublished memoir, plus the original manuscript of his book, so it's uncensored and unedited, you know, and a host of other papers and things. And you think, well, somebody like Tom Glee, who was on This Is Your Life and goodness knows what, you wouldn't think there was anything unpublished about him, but there is. And I always remember my great friend Peter Fox, who was a 19-year-old Hurricane pilot in the battle. He always described himself and his pals as also-rans. Of course, it was the also-rans that I was most interested in because they had, when I came on the scene, probably, you know, a shoebox with their medals and photographs and logbooks tucked away in the attic sort of thing, or in the bottom drawer. And that was unshared, you know, hidden history really at the time. So that's really what I was interested in. So we'll see, but yeah, all the material will be very carefully scrutinized and screened.
So to quantify what we're looking for there, if you're watching this, folks, live or later on, it's the kind of things we're looking for: family scrapbooks that may have mentions, diaries, anything, police reports, newspaper cuttings that were kept and annotated, anything like that from that era. And not just about fighter pilots, but as you're saying, they're about factories, about train journeys, about coastal command, bomber command, the ambulance the drivers, the civil defense, the ARP was anything from that era that seems to pertain to the Battle of Britain that they think has never been seen the light of day. That's the kind of stuff you're looking for. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So it's, I mean, as people are saying, a written memoir could be just as dodgy as a spoken memoir. But the point is, it's getting that material there, and as a detective, you and the other people involved in this will then sift through this and go, okay, this is good, this is less than good, this needs cooperation, this needs investigation. But the point is, it's casting a wide net to then see what you get in that net, and then gradually get down to these 7 volumes.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we bring things to end, because it will be a short one, folks, anything else you want to say about this project that you think that needs to be said to just so people can go out there and go out there and help with the right information?
Well, if anybody wants to get involved, at the moment I'm not sure how anybody can get involved, but if you're interested, just contact me. Contact me through the website if you've got any suggestions about what can be done. I'm open to office kind of thing. As I say, it's going to be a very evolving process. I think the whole thing will be. So what we'll end up doing with it all ultimately, I couldn't say at the moment, but I think it's tremendously exciting, and it's such an exciting thing. I mean, I'm passionate about sharing history, and passionate about recording and sharing the Battle of Britain history, particularly that whole period really between Versailles in 1919 going through to sort of 1942ish, I suppose, is really my sort of period, and the opportunity to engage with people and interest people in that and share this passion with me is just a fantastic thing to be able to do.
Well, exactly, and I can see it already. It could lead on to Dieppe people's projects and D-Day people's projects and Market Garden.
Why not? Yeah, why not?
Well, we'll leave it there because we want the people to watch this and distribute this, and we'll bring things to an end. So, folks, the link to the Battle of Britain People's Project is in the description below, so you can go there. There's a contact form you can do. Dilip has his own website and contact via there. Social media, Facebook, what have you. There's various ways of getting in touch. Pen and Sword are involved in it. The Battle of Britain Trust are involved in it. So, as you said, other people will probably step in and join as it gets bigger and grows this project. So it's a question now of just getting the ball rolling and seeing what people come forward with. So
absolutely
brilliant. Well, we'll do a proper show with you, Dilip, in the future about something or other, but that was a nice short and sweet one. I'll just take you off screen for a second, bring you back on a minute. So, folks, Kevin Hemel is joining us tomorrow evening to do our 8th Corps pushing down the Cotentin towards Avranches, part of Operation Cobra. Kevin has been a friend of mine for years. It'll be the usual high-level detail, but also a bit of banter between old mates. So that'll be the same time, 7 p.m. UK tomorrow, and then a weekend off, and then more stuff coming your way, Pacific Ground War and Pacific Aviation War. But I'm going to bring Dilip back in, basically say goodbye. So thank you very much, Dilip. I think we've done the perfect job there. We've advertised what we're talking to talk about, and I can't wait for you to come back in a few months' time and tell us about all these exciting accounts you've got from people. So that'll be great. So cheers, everybody. Thank you for watching. Bye. Bye.